Hey, it's Lynn, and welcome back to Anatomy of a Pelikula, my ongoing one woman, one movie at a time campaign to get more international audiences watching Filipino cinema disguised as a humble YouTube series. Because if you've never seen a Pinoy rom com drama, you have genuinely not experienced heartbreak in its most theatrical, most quotable form. Today's subject is Kathy Garcia's 2007 film One More Chance, which is less a movie at this point than a cultural institution. A film an entire generation of Filipino millennials can recite from memory, and one that still gets cited, memed, and referenced nearly 2 decades later. So, let's give it the same close reading we'd given any enduring text and figure out exactly how a story this simple on paper became this permanent in the culture. Just a quick heads up, as always, before we dive in, this is a full spoiler film dissection. That said, I won't be covering every single detail, so it's still worth watching the entire movie yourself to catch the nuances that I didn't get to. So, anyway, let's proceed. In the movie, we meet Popoy, played by John Lloyd Cruz, and Basha, played by Bea Alonzo, who have been a couple since university, sharing friends, family, and an assumed future together until Basha ends things, feeling suffocated by the relationship's intensity. As both try to rebuild separate lives, Popoy finds himself drawn to Trisha, played by Maha Salvador, while the film follows what happens when two people who once had everything are forced to grow apart before they can figure out who they are to each other now in the present. The film's first act is dedicated almost entirely to establishing the depth and totality of Popoy and Basha's entanglement. And it does this through sheer repetition and accumulation rather than through any single dramatic event. We see them as classmates, as a couple embedded within the same friend group, and eventually as colleagues at the same firm. And the film takes real narrative time to demonstrate just how focused their lives have become before it ever introduces conflict. This is a deliberate structural choice. By the time the relationship begins to strain, the audience already understands viscerally how much shared architecture, literal and figurative, is about to be dismantled. Popoy's devotion is coded in this act as romantic and admirable, the kind of steadfast loyalty that the genre typically rewards. It's only in retrospect, once the second act reframes it, that this same devotion starts to read as something closer to control. That reframing is the pivot the entire film hinges on. The second act opens with Basha ending the engagement, not because of infidelity or a rival, but because she has come to feel erased by the relationship's totality. A woman whose ambitions have been quietly subordinated to a shared life she never fully chose for herself. This is a meaningfully different inciting incident than the genre's usual betrayal driven breakup, and it reframes Popoy's earlier steadfastness as possessiveness rather than devotion. His response to the breakup, marked by a period of erratic, boundary crossing behavior toward Basha even after she's made her wishes clear, extends that reframing further, functioning as the film's clearest indictment of a romantic ideal. Total, unwavering devotion to one person that the genre so often presents uncritically as the highest form of love. It's in this act that the film delivers what is almost certainly its most quoted piece of dialogue, in which Popoy accuses Basha of having him at his best, and she chose to break his heart. This line functions dramatically as Popoy's most self-serving read of events, an accusation of betrayal that conveniently ignores his own role in making the relationship unsustainable. And the film is careful enough through Basha's reaction and through his new relationship with Trisha to eventually let the audience see through it. Trisha's arc is brief but structurally important. She notices that Popoy has never fully released his attachment to Basha, and rather than compete with a memory, she chooses to end things herself. That decision, made by a secondary character with comparatively little screen time, quietly reinforces the film's underlying argument that unresolved longing, however sincere, isn't a foundation anyone should be asked to build on. The film's back half moves both leads into a period of physical and professional separation. Popoy relocating for work in Qatar, Basha throwing herself into her career, and this geographic distance functions as the film's central structural device for signaling internal growth. Unlike genre conventions that stage personal transformation through, I don't know, a single cathartic scene, One More Chance lets its characters change almost entirely off screen across an unspecified span of years, which mirrors how growth actually tends to happen in life unglamorously, incrementally, and largely out of view. The third act then isn't built around a grand romantic gesture in the way the genre typically demands. No dramatic airport chase, no public declaration. Instead, Popoy and Basha simply encounter each other again. Older, visibly different people, and the film measures their reconciliation almost entirely through restraint and small behavioral shifts. Popoy no longer needing to control the terms of Basha's life, Basha no longer needing to disappear from Popoy's in order to find herself within it. The film's closing exchange, in which Popoy tentatively asks Basha to dinner, and she answers with an open, unhesitating yes that extends well beyond that single evening, is deliberately underplayed relative to the emotional stakes that preceded it. That understatement is the point. The film has spent its entire runtime demonstrating that the two of them nearly destroyed their relationship through excess devotion, excess control, excess self sacrifice. So its resolution is staged appropriately in miniature. Structurally, the film's deeper meaning sits in that tension between devotion and autonomy, and in its insistence that reconciliation is only earned through individual transformation rather than through romantic persistence alone. Popoy doesn't win Basha back by refusing to let go. In fact, his refusal to let go is precisely what nearly cost him the relationship permanently. It's only once both characters have built independent, functioning lives apart from each other that a shared life becomes something that they can choose again, rather than something one of them is trapped inside of. That's a notably mature thesis for a genre frequently and not always fairly dismissed as formulaic. The film argues essentially that love sustained through dependency is fragile, while love chosen freely by two whole people is durable. Culturally, the significance of One More Chance within the Filipino rom-com drama arc is difficult to overstate. It arrived at the height of the John Lloyd Cruz and Bea Alonzo on-screen partnership or love team, and its box office success, along with the Movie of the Year honor it received the following year, helped cement a particular style for Star Cinema's romantic dramas. Recognizable, relatable professional class characters, an emphasis on quietly devastating dialogue over spectacle, and a preference for slow burn emotional realism within a fundamentally commercial mainstream package. Its lines have since migrated well beyond the film itself, recirculating for years afterward across social media as shorthand for the specific ache of loving someone you've outgrown or being loved by someone who hasn't yet learned how to let you grow. Few Filipino films have achieved that level of linguistic embedding into everyday vernacular, and the fact that the film spawned a sequel, a novel adaptation, and even a stage musical nearly 2 decades later speaks to just how durable that cultural foothold has proven to be. What ultimately makes the film endure beyond its quotability is how precisely it captures a very specific, very unglamorous relationship problem. Not villainy, not betrayal, but two people who love each other sincerely and still manage to smother that love through the sheer intensity of their attachment. That's a more difficult, more universally recognizable kind of heartbreak than the genre typically attempts. And it's a large part of why One More Chance is still, for many Filipino audiences, particularly us, the millennials, the reference point every subsequent romantic drama gets measured against. And that's it. You can find One More Chance streaming in full on YouTube. And honestly, it's worth the watch just to fully understand why an entire generation still quotes this movie at two with each other. Filipino cinema has so many gems like this one. The more of us who watch and share them, the more they deserve to travel beyond the Philippines. As always, thank you so much for watching. You are awesome. Stay awesome. And I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.